In the immediate aftermath of divorce, something powerful and deceptive takes over the human mind: relief. Not happiness, relief. The pressure is gone, the arguments have stopped, the expectations have disappeared, and in that emotional vacuum, the brain rushes to fill the silence with meaning. This is the illusion phase, the stage where freedom feels like triumph and escape is mistaken for success. During this phase, she genuinely believes she has won. Every morning feels lighter, not because life is better, but because responsibility has temporarily loosened its grip. There's no one questioning decisions, no compromises to negotiate, no emotional weight to carry. That absence feels like empowerment. She tells herself she's finally choosing herself, finally listening to her needs, finally brave enough to walk away from something that wasn't right. And because the decision was so emotionally costly, her mind must justify it. The brain is wired to protect the ego, and the easiest way to do that is by rewriting the story. Social validation pours fuel on this illusion. Friends rally around her, praising her strength and independence. Compliments come easily. You look happier, you're glowing, I don't know how you survived for so long. These words act like emotional anesthesia, numbing any lingering doubt. On social media, the narrative becomes even stronger. Carefully chosen photos, inspirational quotes, and captions about new beginnings create a public identity that she feels obligated to live up to. Once the story is posted, it has to be true. Admitting uncertainty would mean cracking the image she's just built. Dating apps intensify the illusion. Suddenly, there's attention, lots of it. Messages, matches, compliments from strangers who know nothing about her beyond a few photos and a bio. This flood of interest feels like proof that she made the right choice. The mind interprets quantity as value. If so many people want her, then leaving must have been the right move. What she doesn't realize is that attention is cheap and intention is rare. Most of these men are not evaluating her as a partner. They're reacting to availability. This is where illusion becomes dangerous. She begins to equate novelty with improvement. New conversations feel exciting simply because they are new. New experiences feel meaningful simply because they are different. But novelty stimulates dopamine, not fulfillment. It creates motion, not direction. The brain, still riding the chemical high of change, mistakes stimulation for progress. Everything feels alive, not because it's better, but because it's unfamiliar. At this stage, she isn't living in reality. She's living in a narrative. In that narrative, she escaped limitation. In that narrative, something better is waiting just ahead. The future becomes a fantasy canvas where every unmet desire will finally be fulfilled by the right person, the right life, the right moment. This imagined future is far more attractive than the imperfect past, so the mind clings to it tightly. What makes this phase so convincing is that it isn't fake happiness. It's real emotion, but it's temporary and chemically driven. Change itself produces a psychological high. The problem is that highs fade, and when they do, what remains is not the fantasy, but the reality that was postponed. The loneliness hasn't disappeared, it's just been delayed. The uncertainty hasn't been solved, it's been masked by noise. The illusion phase is not about discovering who she truly is. It's about avoiding who she was afraid to confront. It's not empowerment, it's momentum, and momentum feels incredible until it slows down. When the applause quiets, the messages slow, and the novelty wears thin, the mind is left alone with the one question it has been carefully avoiding. Was this freedom, or was it just escape? That question doesn't get answered yet, not in this phase, because the illusion is still working, for now. After the initial euphoria of freedom, the illusion begins to crack. This is the awakening phase, a slow, almost imperceptible collision with reality. At first, it appears subtle, a date that feels off, a message that seems hollow, a night alone that feels heavier than expected. But beneath these small moments, a larger psychological shift is unfolding. The excitement that once masked uncertainty is fading, leaving raw, unfiltered truth exposed. The awakening often begins with the first real dating experiences. A man seems perfect on paper, attractive, charming, attentive. For a few hours, she can almost convince herself that the fantasy is real. But then, as the night progresses, subtle truths emerge. The man doesn't ask about her fears or dreams. He doesn't notice the little things that mattered in a shared life. He isn't emotionally attuned to her history or her insecurities. In that moment, a stark realization pierces the illusion. Novelty does not equal connection. Attention does not equal intention. Desire does not equal understanding. The perfect date was only perfect on the surface. From there, the cognitive cracks widen. She starts noticing patterns she had ignored. How men talk about their exes, how easily they dismiss others' feelings, how they rush intimacy while skipping depth. Comparisons begin, often unconsciously. She measures every interaction against the memory of her ex, not as a person she loved perfectly, but as someone she knew, someone consistent, someone who understood the rhythms of her life. Each comparison quietly elevates the familiar past over the fleeting excitement of the present. Safety begins to feel more attractive than novelty. Familiarity becomes a subconscious standard, even as she clings to the story that leaving was the brave choice. Meanwhile, her social narrative is still in overdrive. Friends continue to cheer her independence, but the applause no longer carries the same weight. Compliments feel hollow when faced with internal doubt. Social media posts that once fueled pride now become subtle reminders that everyone else's life feels effortless while she struggles to construct hers. The carefully curated best life persona demands constant maintenance, creating exhaustion. Every smile, every confident post is a performance, a rehearsal for an audience that has no real understanding of the inner turbulence she feels. The disconnect between appearance and reality begins to gnaw at her sense of self. The awakening phase is also punctuated by subtle emotional betrayals, real or imagined. Men she dates may fail to meet her expectations, or they may trigger old insecurities she had not anticipated. She begins to confront her own patterns: impatience, selective memory, the ways she may have projected dissatisfaction onto the past. With each disappointment, her mind struggles to reconcile two competing truths. I wanted freedom, and yet I am unhappy. The resulting cognitive dissonance is exhausting. Her brain attempts to maintain equilibrium by rewriting small details of the past, softening memories of conflict, exaggerating positives, and internally debating her choices. This isn't conscious, it's survival. The mind protects itself from admitting that the decision may have been flawed. As the awakening progresses, the fantasy of total autonomy clashes with reality's limitations. Independence comes with logistical and emotional weight. Financial pressures emerge, children's needs demand attention, and personal routines no longer have a partner to share them. The illusions of effortless happiness dissolve into daily navigation of responsibilities once taken for granted. Each day that fails to deliver the promise of excitement is a subtle blow to her constructed narrative. The honeymoon of freedom fades, leaving a quieter, heavier truth. The world she imagined is far less accommodating than the one she left behind. By the end of the awakening phase, she is no longer intoxicated by freedom. Novelty has lost its shine, attention has lost its power, and independence feels heavier than she anticipated. For the first time, she begins to feel the dissonance, the gap between the life she promised herself and the reality she faces. This phase is not dramatic in headlines or social media posts, but it is transformative. It is the moment when distraction no longer shields her from reflection. The illusion is cracking, and the mind begins the painstaking work of reconciling loss, regret, and unmet expectation. The awakening phase sets the stage for the next psychological stage, panic. But for now, it is quiet, subtle, and profoundly internal. Every empty date, every hollow compliment, every social media scroll reminds her that excitement alone cannot replace substance, attention cannot replace connection, and freedom alone cannot replace stability. The brain, once high on dopamine and validation, begins to demand truth, whether she is ready to face it or not. The illusion of victory is fading, and reality is quietly reclaiming its space. By the time the third phase arrives, the honeymoon of freedom and the awakening of reality have both passed. This is the reckoning phase, where distraction is no longer enough, and the full weight of choice settles in. The excitement of novelty has worn off, the attention from others feels hollow, and the independence once celebrated now comes with the heavy cost of responsibility and solitude. Loneliness, previously masked by motion and social validation, becomes unavoidable. At this stage, the illusions she once relied on collapse under scrutiny. She begins to see clearly that leaving a flawed reality does not automatically create a perfect one. Dates disappoint, attempts at fun feel forced, and social validation no longer brings satisfaction. Even her support system falters, friends become distant, social circles shift, and comparisons with younger, unburdened women intensify insecurities. She realizes that the life she thought she was gaining, a life of excitement, admiration, and freedom, has been replaced with chaos, compromise, and emotional exhaustion. Cognitive dissonance reaches its peak. Every day brings reminders that the choice she made may not have led to the fulfillment she imagined. Yet admitting this truth threatens her sense of identity. For years, she built a narrative that leaving was courageous and justified. Reversing that story feels impossible. So instead, she creates coping mechanisms. She rewrites history in her mind, emphasizing past grievances and exaggerating past failures to justify her choice. She might throw herself into self-improvement, new hobbies, or relationships. But these are attempts to mask discomfort rather than genuine solutions. The reckoning phase also exposes the harsh realities of dating and personal identity. The dating pool is limited, and finding meaningful connection is harder than she anticipated. Emotional and logistical baggage, children, finances, past relationships complicate the search for a compatible partner. Meanwhile, she feels invisible in a world that prizes youth and availability, and her confidence erodes under repeated disappointment. The fantasy of better has collided with reality, leaving her with a profound sense of loss and regret. Finally, the most painful aspect of the reckoning phase is witnessing the growth of the ex-husband. He has healed, rebuilt, and improved, often embodying the qualities she once claimed to desire. This creates a unique psychological torment, the realization that what she left was not inherently flawed, but that her own perception and decisions created the distance. The reckoning is a silent, relentless confrontation with the consequences of choices, the illusion of freedom, and the permanence of regret. It is here that she faces the truth. Independence is not the same as fulfillment, and different is not always better.